Good morning, everyone. Wonderful to see you. As Dom said absolutely correctly, I want to talk about a few things related to effectiveness this morning. I want to talk about fragmentation and the profound implications that has for effectiveness. And I want to also make the case for multiplier effects that are powerful and enduring, that are, I feel, been underutilized today when it comes to proving out effectiveness. And in this era of fragmentation, the risk that we could in fact lose those powerful multiplier effects, which is something that we cannot allow to happen. And I'm also going to show you actually how some leading brands are facing into that challenge and using things like, as Don was saying, using the latest in AI and technology to help account for and manage that and deliver better effectiveness. So let's start with using our collective imagination. Let's just work through a few scenarios. Firstly, imagine if you managed to call order your CFO for a coffee, and what you actually have to share with them is that you found something quite startling from your latest effectiveness analytics. You found that the contribution that your marketing effectiveness or your marketing spend was having on sales was actually twice what you thought it was. Or equally, and maybe this is one where you might not invite your CFO to this one, but you find out that you isolate a variable which explains why one campaign drove 4 times the sales uplift in another campaign with the same media spend. And what if I was actually to say that these are both real examples of the multiplier effects that I'm going to be talking about in this session. So let's get into it then. Let's briefly come back to earth with the reality. And I know you guys feel this in your day-to-day world, but the shape of campaigns has changed drastically. We all know that, we all feel that. And what I found interesting was a stat that I pulled out from the Walk Effective 100, which looks at, of all those great effectiveness case studies, what were the total number of channels, of lead channels that featured in all of those different effectiveness case studies? And there were 24 channels that were considered lead. And that shows that evolution over time in how the number of channels and the fragmentation I'm talking about. Now, not to say that's necessarily a bad thing, more channels, more opportunities to engage with consumers and deliver new insights, as we've seen from not just the powerful work we've just seen from the guys over here, but also look at award-winning examples like Guinness, look at their IPA paper, the number of embracing new channels, experiences, innovations, all of those things coming together to really drive effectiveness. But there's no question that there's more to account for. And that's not changing anytime soon, right? Retail media, brand collaborations, social first, social comments, all of those things were absolutely critical things that we need to adjust and respond to. Continuing to fragment. And I really like Tom Roach has a great quote on this, which is about, clearly we've been managing media fragmentation for a while, right? And you've all been accounting for that, and that's important. But we're also entering an era of creative fragmentation, more content, more platforms, more places. So what are the implications of this for effectiveness in this more fragmented landscape? Well, it's my belief that brand equity and creative quality are essential effectiveness multipliers that we underutilize today. And certainly as things continue to fragment and proliferate, there's a risk that we lose the power of those multiplier effects. And I'm going to talk to you about how to not do that, and examples of brands that did a brilliant job in accounting for and bringing them to life. Now, there's no question, when there's more content to cover, when there's more, different touch points to bring together to understand brand exposure and the impact that has on equity, there's no question it's more complex. But we're also going to talk about some of the ways in which AI are providing, new use cases and new ways of unpacking the power of those multiplier effects. And I just don't feel that we can continue on where maybe we only have an understanding of a small proportion of creative quality from everything your consumers are seeing. Or that we're not able to quantify in commercial terms, in pounds, the power of creative quality. all that. We know that brand equity is important and there's a lasting effect of that on sales, but we don't quantify that robustly and prescriptively for your brand. So these are the things that we need to lean into, and I'm going to show you how some brands are doing that. And the other final thing I'd mention on brand, and Don mentioned this, the importance of synergy effects and accounting for how everything connects together and the cumulative impact that has. So let me get into it, and let me start with creative quality. Now, I don't think I'm going to get any arguments that high quality creative matters. So this is just one stat. There are endless numbers of stats on this, but high quality creative drives 4 times the return on marketing investment. That was from some collaboration that we did with Walk, and clearly this stuff matters. But of course then, if there's more content coming from more places, that offers opportunities. There's also a risk that not everything will be as brilliantly creative effective. There's more content to create. Or put another way, from the great David Abbott. And just to go back to what Lynn, Frayne and Reagan were talking about a moment ago, I'm going to talk about the science, but the art is fundamentally critical. It's the art of connected creativity, bringing everything together, a powerful campaign idea that acts as glue to bring everything together. This data shows, from our cross-media database, campaigns that have that powerful campaign idea are far more effective. They can extend that across channels, particularly at driving things like brand associations. Don't forget the importance of the art of connected creativity as we move forward. But the science can be incredibly powerful too. I'm going to show you some examples of that. So one way to bring to life the power of the creative multiplier is through a concept we call at Kantar called effective share of voice. So you're likely familiar with the importance of share of voice, your media pressure benchmark versus competitors. What we find though is when you adjust that share of voice and adjust it for the creative multiplier, i.e. the quality of the content creatively that you'd gather that data from, testing all that content, you get a far more predictive view of the power of your media investment. And take M&S, for example, in their recent really key Christmas trading period, they had a relatively modest share of voice, but when you control and account for effective share of voice, you can really see the power of why they had such a strong trading period. Effective share of voice is one way to really understand that creative multiplier. But there are also other ways to get even more prescriptive and even more detailed. So let me show you how. Particularly, one of the brilliant use cases for getting creative quality data at scale is how you then can plug that into market mix modeling and MMM analytics. And now many of you will be familiar with the power of MMM and econometrics. At its core, most basic, it's telling you the incremental impact of marketing spend versus all those other powerful levers of growth. Telling you at a channel level, what are the optimizations we can make? What are each bringing? The problem, though, is rarely does that channel level analysis account for creative quality. It's usually only media pressure. And our experience is that you can absolutely do that. Fusing creative quality into this analytics gives you both a view of media effectiveness, but also creative effectiveness. And coming together, you can really start to clearly see higher quality creative delivers higher return. But let me show you a case study of that in action. And I'm actually going to show an example from KFC. So let's whet our appetite with this. I'll quickly show you this ad.
Riding with my homies in the middle of the night, almost midnight, like a sticking up too high, heavy laughing, we be shouting, spitting bars, make it crispy. Is it tender, is it hot, make it tasty. Been waiting for this to lie, put some hot sauce on. Crispy, is it tender, is it hot, make it tasty, yeah.
So that's a great ad. It's from, I think, 2023. And it's one that won a Kantar Creative Effectiveness Award. We talked about this case at Cannes recently. And it's actually a case study from KFC in France. And they had an interesting business challenge, actually. How do you drive incremental sales amongst that key sort of under 35 audience? A lot of competitors in that space, particularly with maybe bigger budget ranges that were trying to attract their customers. And they really needed to build predisposition and activate that predisposition. And not only, I think this is a great case study of connected creativity, both the art and the science of that, created a brilliant, full funnel campaign, really strong brand platform at the heart. Were very choiceful in how they upweighted certain media to reach that target group. But what was really interesting is how they approached the science in a different way, and we helped them in a number of ways. Firstly, we helped augment their existing testing of their creative content via survey with AI testing using Link AI. And that helped us give a complete view of all of the different pieces of content across lots of different platforms and the creative quality of that. And we then fed that into an always-on dynamic market mix model that was updated very frequently, and we fused and plugged in creative quality in that and retrospectively as well. And what that did is it offered powerful outcomes in how to not only optimize by spend, but optimize by creative quality across those channels. And what you can see on the left-hand side are the results of that. They're able to say that, of the incremental sales we created from this campaign, 30% of that can be attributed to creative quality. That's really powerful stuff. And then, showing how it's maxed out fully the power of that creative content across different channels. And you can see, with the same spend from some of his ROI and sales uplift figures, the power that had to drive performance. Creative multiplier in action. And we already talked today about Reckitt, but they make another appearance in how they've taken a best-in-class approach to this as well. So in a similar approach, we were able to identify in one market for one brand, there was a 4 times creative multiplier between where their strongest campaigns with the best creative quality drove 4 times the sales uplift. And that leads to very powerful outcomes in terms of organizational alignment, meta-learning, commitment to creative quality. And there was a common unlock, actually, across both of these case studies, and it talks to the points made earlier around AI. They both, of these cases, augmented their understanding of creative quality with AI, high-quality AI testing that broadened the scope of their understanding of creative quality. So, creative multiplier, critically important. Now, my next multiplier I'm going to come on to, as I said earlier, was brand equity. And I'm sure we have many here who know, love, believe in the power of brand equity. But a problem we observe is that it's not always practically fused into day-to-day effectiveness analytics. Telling you, what's the incrementality, what's the impact of this investment on driving sales? How do we, set budgets? How do we optimize our channel mix? And as we continue to see the trends of fragmentation continuing, that simply won't do. And if we're not accounting for the full impact of brand equity on sales, we're missing a big piece of the puzzle. So the top point of here, you can see, the critical importance of identifying the short-term impact of marketing investment on sales. Many of you will be doing that. If you're not using something like MMM, that's a really big step forward in terms of proving effectiveness. But it's this bottom piece here that I wanted to talk about, how you then also demonstrate the impact that investment in brand equity or investment in marketing has on brand equity, and the impact that has on base sales, that long-lasting effect of spend that often can be missing. And I think Dom shared a stat earlier, Les Burnett, 50% of the impact from marketing, particularly brand building campaigns, comes after year 1. So in this completely increasingly fragmented world, absolutely need to account for the impact of that. And maybe to visualize it a slightly different way, of course, identify those crucial short-term effects from the impact of your campaigns, the blue line. But what often could be missing, and what's critically important, is this yellow line of those longer-lasting impact of impact via your brand equity. And that builds and grows over time with the baseline. And I'm going to show you how some brands have done exactly that. And TSB is a brand that we helped with this challenge. They had ambitious targets to grow their share in market, acquire new customers, increase their investment significantly to help do that. But they only had a sort of view of the short term, and that was missing the full picture. And when we helped them integrate that brand view and the short and long-term effects, they were starting to see this longer tail of account openings that were resulting from spend showing the brand building impact. And that led to very different optimization outcomes and decisions. And they were able to use that brand multiplier to deliver more with less. So my final point on the brand multiplier relates to synergy effects, talked about earlier. Grace Kite uses a great phrase around increasingly we're going to be dependent on lots of little brand exposures and the impact of those coming together to drive brand. And that's absolutely the case. And in this era of increasing fragmentation, we absolutely need to account for the role of synergy effects coming together. We can no longer rely on a linear view of the role of channels. Maybe you have an MMM that's updated once a year, twice a year, and only has a linear view of the relationship between those channels and impact in market. And that simply won't do if you're really trying to account for the collective power of all of those touch points and channels working together. And this is where my second call out, or the second dividend, shall we say, of AI to effectiveness, the ability to understand synergy effects in a more real-time way to help optimize effectiveness. Absolutely need to understand and account for synergy effects in your effectiveness analytics. And a brand, I'll show you, this is a debranded example of a brand that did exactly that. So if you think back to those, the sort of top bit and bottom bit of that chart, short and long-term effectiveness, for this alcohol brand, we saw when we purely looked at short-term, the sort of contribution of paid media to that sales performance was about 4%. When you integrated the true long-term and the effects that were feeding through from building brand equity, it was nearer 21%. A 4 times multiplier on the power of media investment when you account for brand equity. And clearly in that case, if they continue to ignore and miss that brand multiplier, there's a risk they go missing from your local pub or store. Okay, so I've covered a lot here, but let me sort of wrap up some key messages. So firstly, we talked a lot about AI, and the promise of AI is everywhere, and rightly we should show appropriate caution around different use cases around AI. But what I've been through today is proven use cases of how some of the leading brands have used AI to help drive and move forward with effectiveness. Whether that's how using AI ads testing, using Link AI, the most validated solution in that space, to give a broader view of creative quality, to plug those gaps, to then use that as fuel for effectiveness analytics to find that creative multiplier. Whether it's how AI can be used to understand in real time the impact of investment on sales and also get more granular on that, the role of different channels. Or whether it's actually bringing all those things together and understanding those crucial synergy effects of everything working together, or even the role of creative quality and feeding that in to how you plan and optimize. And if you want to see any more of any of these and get hands-on, you can come to the Ignition Zone in the marketing effectiveness space and we can show you how this works. So that's it, right? So many of you will be at different stages of your journey. And of course, as we see new channels coming on board for us to use, all those exciting developments that I talked about at the start, they offer great new ways to engage and reach consumers, but it also is creating a continued fragmented landscape. And it's my strong belief that those multipliers of brand equity, of creative quality, remain absolutely critical to fuse into effectiveness analytics, both today and in the future. And there's some practical steps you can take here, right? You can ask yourself, do you know what your creative multiplier is in the way that some of these case study examples that I've shown you do? Where's your opportunity to step change? How can you bake that into ongoing planning? Do you know prescriptively what your brand multiplier is? Have you proven that out? Have you shown the impact that your spend has on creating lasting sales? How can you bake that in to your approach to planning? So I guess my call to action is, if you can do those things, then you're absolutely set to really drive effectiveness in the era of continued fragmentation. And if you're not, hopefully that gives you some inspiration of what we can shoot for to deliver and not let those multipliers go missing. Thank you very much.